What is your name?
Stephen Whittredge.
Do you have a nickname during service?
I was in active duty first and then the reserves later. I didn't really have much of a nickname in active duty. Um, I had a call sign because I was on the radio, but
Right.
in the reserves I did have a nickname, and my nickname was Grampy. Because I had gotten out after active duty, then there was a break in service, and then I came back in.
Right.
So I was older than everybody else in my rank, and so Grampy.
Right. So what is your age now and when you were serving?
I'm 47 now. When I joined up, I think I was 22 or 23. It was right after college. And then I had the break in service, and I was in my 30s when I went into the reserves.
Where was your place of birth?
Arlington, Mass. Yeah.
And what was your rank when you left the Army?
Sergeant, E5.
All right. Well, I kind of guess that answers the next question. What branch of the military you served? So.
The Army and Army Reserve. Yeah.
All right. What was your military occupational specialty?
I had two. When I was active duty, I was in the infantry, and when I was in the reserves, I was an MP.
All right.
So how long did you serve, and how many times were you deployed, and for how long?
So let's see. So I started in 1992. Well, it's 12 years total, but some of it was active, some of it was
Right.
reserve, and some of it was inactive reserve. I don't know if you've even had that discussion with anyone yet. But when you sign a military contract these days, your contract is for 8 years. And a portion of it, determined by the contract, is active or reserve. And the rest is inactive ready reserve, IRR. And you don't drill, you don't do anything, you're just there, and if they want you, they can call you back. So after I got out of active duty, there were several years in the IRR where you don't actually do anything. But you're there, and they can call you, and during the Iraq War, they did call people back into the MPs from the IRR, and that's a kick in the butt for some people who think they're out.
Right.
But I'm making it more complicated than it is. It was a total of 12 years, but it was so disjointed and over different types of service that
Right.
you need a calculator to
Yeah.
to figure it out.
Deployment.
Sorry?
Deployments.
Deployments. Oh, okay. So I went to Somalia in '93, and I went to Haiti in '94, and I went to Iraq in 2003, and there were other deployments. They were not combat deployments. Technically, Haiti wasn't a combat deployment either. Iraq was very much a combat deployment, as was Somalia. Haiti was less so. There wasn't a lot of shooting.
Political.
Well, there just wasn't much shooting going on there. There wasn't any resistance in Haiti to what we were doing, so it wasn't really a combat deployment.
Right.
All right.
Where were you stationed?
When I was active duty, I was at Fort Drum, New York, 2nd Battalion, 14th Infantry. And when I was in the reserves, I was at the reserve. We were stationed out of the reserve unit in Londonderry, New Hampshire. The reserve station up there.
When just a quick tangent. When you were said you were in a 2nd Battalion, 14th Infantry, did they still have the Stryker Brigade Combat Team organization back then? Or?
No, the 10th Mountain Division.
Oh, you're the 10th Mountain Division.
Yeah.
Okay.
Things have changed a lot, but I might be wrong, but I don't think any of the brigades at 10th Mountain Division are Stryker. I think they're all light infantry. I'm almost positive all of the ones at Fort Drum are still light infantry. And there's one at Fort Polk. That if any of them are Stryker, that one is Stryker, but I don't think it is. They didn't have Strykers when I was first joining up.
I mean, what I meant to ask was, did they still have the Brigade Combat Team kind of type of organization? Or?
Not really.
Okay.
That's kind of newish. That happened after I got out of active duty.
So what inspired you to join the armed forces?
So I was in college during the first Gulf War, and very patriotic attitude, as did a lot of people. You know, we watched the news every day. We watched all the bombs hitting and all the stuff, and uh, college students alike. And but at some point after I graduated, it occurred to me that if you're going to be in favor of sending people off to a place where they have a significant chance of dying, whether it's a high chance or a low chance, it's still a chance, and it's not an insignificant chance. If you're willing to send people to do that, that you ought to be willing to do it yourself. Put your money where your mouth is. And at the time, I was very willing to have them sent, and so I thought that it would be best for me to back it up. And so I joined up right after college.
Fair enough. So that kind of answers the question, what you did before you volunteered. Were you looking at a specific major or anything in college? Or?
Well, gets into a long string. I graduated with a degree in history.
But tell them what you wanted to do.
Well, I started as an astronomy major at Case Western Reserve University in the United States, and I was not a particularly good scientist, and calculus classes have a way of enforcing that point without much doubt. So I switched to history, which was my minor anyway, and I went from academic probation to Dean's High Honors List in one semester. And you kind of say, okay, I guess I should carry on with this because I'm pretty good at it. And so, but I did, my GPA at Case was terrible because I had done so poorly at math and some of the science classes. So I transferred to another university where the GPA wouldn't follow me, and that was the University of St Andrews in Scotland.
And he was interested in political science?
Political science, history, yeah.
Because he wanted to go into foreign...
Yeah, at the time I thought I might have a career in the Foreign Service, but I didn't want that as much after I got out of the Army.
Neat. So, what was the most... This is kind of a broad question. You can answer this in any way you want. What was kind of the most important experience you had overall in the military?
That's almost an impossible question to answer because it is so broad. Most important experience. I mean, I can tell you that the deployments were. How do we describe the deployments? So the combat deployments to Somalia and to Iraq. Those, I guess, in the sense that they have the most impact, and they're the what stick with you, and you never forget the people you were with. You do forget some things, but there are things that you'll never forget. So, I guess in the sense of impact, it was certainly the combat deployments. I wouldn't rate one as more important than the other. Somalia was fairly short in relative terms. I mean, it was we got there in August 1993, and we left in December 18th, 1993. I remember the day, as you would, because Somalia was on a day-to-day basis was a lot more intense to me than Iraq was. Okay. Our job, my battalion's job in Somalia was the quick reaction force. If anybody got attacked, our job was to roll up and get to where they were and basically rescue them or protect them and drive off the enemy. So, in that sense, you knew when they said mount up, you knew that second that you were going to go get in a firefight. Right? You knew there was no question because that's what our job was. And so there's a certain sort of intensity with that operations tempo that there just is. Whereas in Iraq, as an MP, I did a lot of patrolling. I did a lot of convoy escorts. And that's a very different sort of animal because you're not going out and getting in contact with the enemy every time you go out. In fact, you're hoping you don't. But there's always the possibility. In Iraq, most injuries and deaths are caused by IEDs, which are roadside improvised explosive devices. So, you know, when your job is to ride on the roads every day, you know, you're very aware of that. But in any case, it wasn't as intense day to day, but it was almost oppressive because, you know, you knew exactly what was going to happen in Somalia, whereas for us in Iraq, you never knew. And it was always sort of there. Is it going to happen today? Who knows?
I don't know much about the Battle of Mogadishu, but when you were in Somalia, were you part of the QRF that essentially went in and got those
Yes.
men who...
2nd Battalion, 14th Infantry was the QRF for all of that area. I mean, you know, 99% of American forces in Somalia were in Mogadishu. And the Rangers and their special operations guys that were with them, they weren't under the same command as everybody else. We were all under a different command than they were. But other than them and us, our brigade consisted of our battalion of infantry. There was a battalion of aviation. I forgot who else there was. It was another battalion of some kind. I can't remember what it was. But it was the U.S. forces in Somalia were very combat arms light. Most of the combat arms had been pulled out after they believed they pacified the country. So there wasn't a lot there. There were no American tanks, no American armored vehicles, and we weren't allowed to use artillery. So, yeah, so when the Rangers got in trouble, we were the only ones there. And I've seen the movie. I don't like the movie very much because the implication of the movie is that you know, this UN convoy arrived and rescued the Rangers. And while there were UN forces with us, they were less than useful in combat. The Pakistani tank platoon that was with us on that day stopped as soon as we were taking fire, and they wouldn't go any further. These guys are in tanks, and they said, "That's it. We're not going any further." We're light infantry guys. We have rifles. You know, what are we going to do? We can't do anything to them. So I have to be careful about how I tell you some of this, because some of this is not something I'm really wanting to share with you. The Malaysians, I'll put it this way, the Malaysians wanted to stop. The Malaysians were the drivers of the armored personnel carriers that it was an ad hoc mission, right?
Okay.
You know, and it was quick, you know, and this was ad hoc, right? So word comes down, the Rangers are stuck. Their guys already tried to get them. They got repelled. We already sent a company in, just one company. That company got repelled. So this is pretty heavy. So we're taking the whole battalion and we're going out. Actually, in practice, I think we took the composition of the battalion at the time was we had a headquarters company and 3 line companies. Line companies are the ones that are, you know, infantry companies, whereas the headquarters company had, you know, medics and all these other things, mechanics, cooks, whatever. Right. So the line companies are the ones that do the fighting. So we have 3 line companies, 2 of which were available. One was somewhere out in the boonies training. So they weren't actually available for the mission. They called them back, but they weren't going to be back in time for the mission. So it was really 2 companies. And the first company got sent in and got repelled. Then they called us and said, right, we're going to go in with both companies at the same time. We're going to link up with the Pakistani tanks, and we're going to link up with the Malaysians who have some APCs. These were wheeled, not tracked APCs, and they were painted white with UN on the side, right? Yeah, they might as well painted a target on it. So we link up. These guys had been there all day. They've been stuck there all day. I think their mission started in the morning, and this was like 6 or 7 o'clock at night. They gave us the word that we were going out, and it took us an hour to get there and link up. It took them like an hour and a half to come up with the plan. And then it took us a little while to mount it. So what the plan was, we mount up on the APCs. We're light infantry. Light infantry means there's no transportation integral to the unit, right? Light infantry means you walk. Your transportation is the leather personnel carrier, your boots. And so, if we get a ride from someone, it's someone else. They wanted to put us in these Pakistani APCs so that we didn't have to fight on foot all the way to where the Rangers were. So that was the plan. After we left, I'm inside this tin can, so I don't get to see too much. You can hear the rounds bouncing off. And I couldn't see it at the time, but when we started taking fire, the tanks stopped and they wouldn't go any further. But the APCs continued on, and that's where I have to be careful about what I tell you, because there's certain things that, let's say they didn't want to go, and they were convinced to go. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's what it is. Even with the convincing that they got, they weren't going to go first. We actually had to dismount the APCs and lead the way and fight through on foot, and the APCs followed us. So, we had, like I said, we were fighting on foot block by block to get to where the Rangers were, and the tanks didn't come, and the APCs were convinced to come, but they came last. So they didn't do any. Once we hit that point, they really weren't doing any fighting. Excuse me, I'm forgetting why I'm telling you this. It's a bit frustrating for me to see that movie. I watched it once. I haven't watched it since because it's such a load of crap. Oh, the UN rescued them. Yeah, no, the UN didn't rescue them. The 2nd Battalion, 14th Infantry rescued them. And if it wasn't for the 2nd Battalion, 14th Infantry, they would all be dead.
Jeez.
And you lost a friend that day.
Yeah.
That's what
James Martin, he was shot across the street from me.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I think another point that you ought to talk about, do you guys mind if I remind him of stuff?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. Is about the friends he made in the military, because I think of all the important experiences, the friendships that were bonded because of this are probably one of the most significant things in our life. I mean, our families are friends with their families still. And in fact, before we came here, one of his buddies from Iraq was at our house last night, and they just they still call on Stephen. They still come and talk to him. The day before, we were talking to one of his friends from Somalia. We get together every few years, or try to now. It took him 20 years to kind of reconnect with people.
Well, Facebook came around. Guys you had lost contact with, now you just go on Facebook and half the battalion's on there. So yeah, we're in touch with a lot of guys we haven't seen in decades, and it's great when you get together with them. It's like, he never left them. It's like you saw him yesterday. It's pretty cool the way. But she's right. The friendships and the people are everything. I can't really emphasize that too much. It's about the guys. Everything's about the guys. You don't have to like everybody.
Yeah.
But even the people you don't like, they're part of the team, and the guys you do like, you're tight with forever.
Thank you.
How did your service in the military affect your life today?
That's a really hard question to answer. So I'm actually medically retired right now. I have a rating of 100% disability from the VA. For PTSD, And the funny thing is that my employer initiated the retirement. My boss called me into her office one day and said, have you considered medical retirement? And well, then we just did it. Because I think I disliked being there as much as they disliked having me there. And it was best for everybody that I retire. So, but, I don't want to make it sound like it's all negative. There's been a lot of positive. You're never really the same person you are before you join the army, or at least if you go to combat, you're not. It's like your button.
Right.
I see stuff every day that most people just ignore, and I don't look at it the same way other people do. I said, well, okay, I'm not ragging on you,
Right.
but an unbuttoned pocket is a lack of discipline. Lack of discipline gets you killed. Well, I'm just using you as an example.
Luckily,
I'm not
the Boy
tooling
Scouts
on
don't
you.
come under a lot of fire.
That's true, but you don't.
I understand what you're saying.
I can intellectually distinguish between a Boy Scout and a soldier, but in my gut, I look at that unbuttoned pocket, and I see something that is a sign of a sloppiness that gets people killed. And I'm not, this is not about you. I hope you understand
Right,
that I'm
yeah,
just using this as an example because it's there to be used. I see things every single day, and I look at them in a way completely different than anyone who hasn't been there. You want to talk about trash in the road?
Oh my God. I drive most everywhere we go because it's sort of a long story. Just to give you the background, when he was in Iraq, he was MP, but that doesn't just mean walking around being a policeman.
Right.
What their job is they guarded the roads, like between like Fallujah, Baghdad, those areas.
Patrols and escorts.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they're escorting convoys. As you can imagine, that is a giant attractor of, the, not the rebel forces, but just fire.
Insurgents,
Yeah,
right.
insurgents and all of that. So, you've got taking fire on the roads, you've got IEDs, you've got like any of that stuff. So when he drives, his mission, every time he drives, it's a mission, and it is to get there and to get there unharmed, to get there quickly. And people who are driving slow and people who are driving erratically are dangers to everybody. Then, God forbid there's trash or a pothole in the road, because that's an IED. And I cannot tell you how many times we're driving. Debris in the road. This is what he says to me. Debris in the road. I'm like, it's a paper bag. It's like, it could be anything. Debris in the road. Left here, left here, left here. And if I don't immediately obey the order, like if I look right to check and see no one's coming and I don't obey, he questions my ability as a soldier, which is funny because I'm a princess, not a soldier. I remind him of this, but it doesn't work. And it's not just in stuff like this. There are like,
Well, like at work.
he goes into Sergeant Whittredge mode, and I call him that just to remind him.
When you're at work, you react to orders instantly, or and if you give me something to do that, that's it's so hard to describe. Things have to be done certain ways. They have to be done efficiently. They have to be done in a manner that's going to ensure the safety of the troops, and you have to have a focus. I think that's the key. At work that was the biggest thing. So you expect a certain a certain level of leadership, and you expect certain things from your leaders, and you just don't always get it from civilians. I'm going to tool on civilians a little bit here, and I'm sorry, but it's just the way it is. Like she said, my buddy was over our house the other day, and one thing we immediately got on was civilians. Oh man, these freaking civilians, they don't know a damn thing.
It's fine.
It's
so and you know what? If you can get with any combat soldier, I'd be amazed if you haven't heard that already. get with the combat soldiers and well, you know, what do you think about civilians leadership and the way civilians do things? So civilians, oh, they're just worthless. They can't do anything. They have no focus. They have no discipline. You know, I know there's exceptions to everything, but it's okay. So the question is, how's the Army affected me? The Army has completely affected the way I operate, the way I do things, the way I perceive the world, because you look at something small, like a piece of trash, and I see something dangerous. You know, it's about survival. I think you look at things that other people just don't even think about, and it's that is a potential danger that can kill you. So that never really goes away, and some people have a hard time with it. Because they call it PTSD. I think they should leave off the D. And the reason I think that is because if you take any person and you put them through a set of circumstances where their life is in peril on a regular basis, they're going to come out of that looking at things differently. That is a survival skill. And you know what? There's nothing disorderly about it. That's a normal reaction to that situation. I was in Iraq for 16 months. I mean, just think about that. 16 straight months. That's in country. That's not at home getting ready. I was deployed for over 2 years. My feet were on the ground in Iraq for 16 months. Most soldiers in Vietnam only had to be there for a year.
Yeah, that's right.
They were the first reservists there too, so there was no place for
I don't know
them.
if we were the first, but we were very early.
Yeah.
We were there in April. They took the country in March. And we were in Anbar Province. Anbar Province is where Fallujah. I spent a lot of time in Fallujah and a lot of time in Ramadi. You know, these are not exactly warm, fuzzy places.
Yeah.
You slept on the top of your
Yeah,
Humvee.
when we first got there, there was nothing. We slept on our trucks. You know, you had to make a toilet out of half a 55-gallon drum. You know, we had
With no
MREs for
walls.
months. So you know, but that's not the stuff that causes you changes in your head. It's the, oh my God, that guy just got killed. You could be careful, or if you're not careful, it'll happen to you too. So you have to pay attention to everything.
Yeah.
Hypervigilance.
Hypervigilance is what they call it. Yeah, this is the thing. The doctors have all that. But you know what? It's just survival over there. It's only over here where people don't act that way because they've never had to.
I can throw this out.
It's not mine.
But
I'll get rid of
everything.
they you know, people think it's a disorder because they have no experience of it. You know, and it's another reason why it's hard to communicate with civilians is just because they have no common sort of experience to understand some of these things. You know, I can talk to you about it until the cows come home. I can sit here and flap my gums all day, and it's like a movie. You know, it's not, I mean, I'm not trying to insult you, but there's no way you're ever going to understand it the way I understand it, or the way one of my buddies understands it. The only way you're going to do that is if you go and sign up and go over. Otherwise, it's just talk. It's just theory. And you can understand it intellectually, but you don't understand it in your gut.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, these people that I was there with, you know, there's certain things that we don't even have to talk about.
Yeah.
There's certain ways we're going to act, and all of us will probably act the same way alone, but when we're together.
Well, also, that's the only time you ever relax is when you're with with a bunch of them. Like, we go to a restaurant or someplace like that, and we have to sit in the back of the restaurant with his back to the wall so he can see the entrances and the exits, things like that. But when they're with their Army buddies, as long as he knows one or two of those guys have it in their view, he can sit with his back to the door because he knows those guys are there. He trusts them in a way he can't trust anybody else. And he trusts me very much. But it's different. I'm not trained. And I was talking to one of his Army buddies about it one night. He had a big bonfire party at his house, and we were all there. And I told him, I'm like, trying to make me a soldier, and you know, this whole idea of all this. And he goes, I said, I don't know if why he thinks he can, you know, make me like this. And the guy said, he's not thinking of you as a soldier. You're the target. His job is to protect you all the time. And it changed the way that I looked at what he was doing, because I realized all of a sudden he's constantly looking at all the threats to me and my son as well, like our
Right.
child together. So that's part of his hypervigilance, is his, like, we live in Topsfield, Massachusetts. Do you know how much like crime there is in Topsfield? Probably like
Not much.
Manchester. We have alarm systems on our car.
Yeah.
We check every I mean, like, it is every night, all of this, and it's like it's about the responsibility, because he can't rest unless things are battened down. And we're going to Disney this year, and I've had to do so much planning for it. You do anyway, but I have to keep him abreast. Like, this is, you know, part of my planning is which parks are going to be the least populated on which days, so that he's not in big crowds, those kinds of things,
Right.
because big crowds are dangerous places. And so things like that affect our life a lot. But the good thing about a place like Disney, we're staying at Shades of Green, which is a small military base on the Disney property.
Really?
Yep, they have a military presence there. Everybody who's there is either ex-military, current military, the 100% disabled vets, that kind of thing. And
Never knew that.
it's one of the biggest resorts, but it has the smallest amount of rooms, so that they're not jam packed on top of each
Yeah,
other, and
yeah.
it's great for them.
That's
They're also
good.
surrounded by golf courses,
Yeah.
so it's, you know, like,
Fields of fire.
yeah. But it's nice, and so we can handle those things. But I realize it changes my life too, because in another situation I wouldn't have to do this stuff. But in the same respect, if something if something happened to him, I know any one of his army buddies would come and help me in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
In fact, they have. When he hurt his knee in a motorcycle accident, I called his mom to tell her what was going on, but the next person I called was Brute Nitty, which I actually call him by his last name too. But he came right away, came and helped me out. These guys would come from anywhere, help us anyway. I have no doubt about it in my mind at all that any one of them, if
come
I
from
needed them.
across the country if she.
In fact, Jimmy Joe, the guy whose bracelet he wears,
Yeah.
his mother died. Now she only had, was Jimmy her only kid? No,
I think he had a sister.
he had a
didn't
sister. That's what it was, and a bunch of the guys who not live near there, but that could get away. His mom died, and they didn't want his sister to have to bury Jimmy's mom with nobody else. Like 8 of them from across the country flew in and helped Jimmy Joe's sister bury his mom, because that's who they are. They're
Jimmy
real.
Joe's been dead for 20 years.
Yeah,
And they came to help his family.
yeah. I mean, they knew him for what, 2 years before that? But it's a different,
Yeah, 2 years.
time is not the same.
Well, we knew him in Somalia.
Yeah, because you knew what they go through in that tiny time is more than you would experience with someone else. It's almost like a book. You know how you read a book and it's action after action, so you feel like you really know somebody because you've gone through like harrowing experiences with them in a book. Well, when you're in the army, everything you do is a life or death situation in a deployment like that, so they do know each other.
Yeah.
And they trust each other in a way that they'll never trust another kind of human being, because these are people who save their lives. These are the people they depend on to guard their back, to let them rest so that they can go to the bathroom. We don't have to depend on somebody to guard the door when we go pee. You know what I'm saying? I know that sounds crude, but it's a completely different world. It's necessary for survival there. So there's a bond that we will never experience with other people.
Yeah, there are things like that where you just have to experience something where you actually really know what it is. Like, I'm just going to take a little anecdote here. The past week or something, I went to Philadelphia on a service trip to get help out in impoverished neighborhoods. And I mean, the most I've really ever experienced growing up in Manchester, when I've taken the train into Boston, it goes over Chelsea and you see the stuff down from the train and you just look at it, but you really don't know what it's like until you actually spend a week with them. And it's really, you really, like you were saying, you've really got to experience it to know what it's like. So, I mean, I know it's not the same story, but
No, but
Right.
it's understandable.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
So, last question. What kind of advice would you give to someone looking to volunteer today?
Before I answer that, I'll just say if you want to ask me something off the script, you're welcome to do
No, it's-
that too.
yeah,
But
that kind of comes last.
yeah, I'll answer that question. So the way I interpret this question was that if we're talking about somebody who wants to join or has made the decision to join, by all means join, because it is a unique thing. But you have to really understand what you're doing before you do it, and I think some people don't. I think some people say, I'm gonna be the join the army or the Marines or something, and I'm gonna be a badass, and I'm gonna get a lot of girls or something. You need to understand what you're volunteering for. Your life
that
is
kid who told you he wanted to join because he wanted to go camping.
yeah. See, people, you gotta yeah.
If you want to do that, you can come here for the Boy Scouts.
Yeah,
That's what I said. Be a Boy Scout.
your life is literally not your own anymore. Okay, and if you disobey an order, you go to jail, kind of thing. That doesn't really happen very often. More often than not, if you're a jerk and you don't do what your sergeants tell you, they'll kick you out.
Yeah.
But that's going to affect your life. You've been kicked out of the military. Oh well. I wonder what our next applicant is like, right?
Yeah.
There are veterans in a lot of places, and a lot of veterans know a lot of other veterans. And if an application comes from, tell me about your military service. Well, I was discharged for failure to adapt. That's going to be a problem. So you have to understand, what it is you're getting into and how much you're giving up, how much you may be getting as well. I mean, it's not, I don't want to make it sound like it's all negative. There's a lot of positives. You learn things that you're just never going to learn anywhere else. It's just, it's completely unique, and there's really no easy way to describe it. But if you're not 100% serious and dedicated, then stop. Don't do it. If you can't bring that kind of dedication and commitment to doing something that you will be absolutely miserable doing, at some point, I promise, and you will be hating life, and everybody who's ever joined the Army has questioned that decision at some point during their military career, I promise, or probably any other branch, except maybe the Air Force.
Stop with that.
No, it's funny how you say that because everyone's looking at me because I originally wanted to go into the Air Force.
And don't let that knock
No,
you.
no,
My
no, I
father
get
was
that,
in
I
the
get
Air
His
that.
father was in the Air Force. He just jokes.
just
that
do a
it's
lot.
not as
It's an ongoing
disciplined.
joke with all branches of the military.
Okay.
Everybody
It really
just goes off on the Air
Yeah,
Force.
but in all seriousness, there will be a time in virtually any branch where you're gonna say, "Why the hell did I do this to myself?" And if you weren't meant to be there, it's something best to discover before you do it.
Yeah.
And my final piece of advice for anybody who's going to sign up is have an exact understanding of what you're hoping to get out of it, and don't trust your recruiter. Don't get me wrong, your recruiters aren't necessarily out to screw you, but their priorities are not your priorities.
Yeah.
Their priority is to get you to sign on the line at all costs. Your priority, if you decide I want to join the military because I want to learn this skill, hold out for that skill. Do not let the recruiter tell you, "Oh, you can get it later. Just join this now, and then it's easy to swap later," because that's not the case. Get what you are there to get immediately, or you will regret it.
Yeah.
So.
Any other questions or any other anecdotes, stories, or anything else? I guess it's.
It's hard to. I mean, most of my anecdotes and stories are either inappropriate or.
That's all right.
Or.
I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We understand.
Yeah.
What he's
Yeah.
saying.
That's.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Keep those tears up.
So I mean, I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have. As far as volunteering things, most of the things that stick out in my mind are not really stories that I would tell civilians.
Right.
But
No, that's totally
unsolicited.
respectable.
Some of them don't have to do with being in active duty either. There were times when we've been, like, we drove down to Georgia, when you had the Blazer,
Yeah.
and he had the Iraq and Somalia stickers on the back of the car. The car broke down, and we took it to, like, I was just looking for someone who could fix Chevys at the time, and we found a guy, and we took the car there, and the guy was a Vietnam vet, and he fixed our car just for the cost of the part.
I don't think he
And
even
not-
charged us the cost of
no
the part.
way
He
he
charged
did.
us $100 for a computer chip.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the cost of that
And
chip.
he took a piece out of his own car to fix ours.
Really?
Hmm.
Well,
All because he was a vet.
I didn't even meet the guy.
I did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she dropped the truck off. He only even knew I was a veteran because of
Yeah.
the stuff on the back of the truck.
And he did it for that. And I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's happened several times. I've had people stop me in the parking lot and say something like, tell your husband I said thank you for his service. And I'm like, well, how do you know I'm not the vet? And they're like, one guy said, well, that's an infantry badge, and women weren't allowed in the infantry.
Well,
And
until
then-
now.
Until now.
Until now.
And then there was a couple of other things, like that they were talking about. But they knew, like, and you could tell, like, these were other vets.
Yeah.
And there's an understanding that they have that I think is, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
Well, her grandfather, what died last year,
Yeah.
he was in World War II, and there were things he told me that he never told anyone in his family, which was really
No one.
an honor.
Yeah.
He was 95 when he died. So
Yeah.
there is a sort of understanding and a bond. I mean, your closest bond is obviously the guys you served with, but there's a sort of a brotherhood that's even larger than that.
This is more of kind of a specific question, something I'm curious about. You said when you were in Somalia, there was like an aviation battalion that you were working with. Did you like do any close work with them, or?
Well, yeah, on what is it, October? I have to look at my October 3rd. I mean, when you say close, I didn't work with them person to person. I never actually met any of them. I wasn't even stationed in the same place in the city as them because they were all at the airfield and we were at the university compound. That's the kind of running joke among the guys who were in Mogadishu. It's that we're all graduates of the University of Mogadishu.
That's actually on his Facebook page.
It's on, yeah.
where you can say
Oh yeah, all of them.
Yeah.
Everybody's
University of Mogadishu.
graduate of the university. What did
Wow.
you study? Urban combat techniques. I got a master's degree.
Yeah.
So I don't think I met a single aviation guy,
Okay.
but there were times when we worked very closely with them because I remember at one time when they destroyed a building that was as close to us as that house, and apparently, and I don't know, someone was getting ready to shoot at us from it, and we were that close to it, and they just totally destroyed, just burst into an explosion.
Wow.
I didn't know exactly what was happening at first, but then I looked up and saw the helicopter zoom by after this thing was just totally leveled. I'd say that's pretty close.
That's really cool, though.
Yeah.
He can't hear now, but he's still alive.
Well, the reason I can't hear is because you can't wear hearing protection in combat, and doubly so when you're a radio operator like I was. I had to be able to, have the radio on my ear, and I had to be able to hear what was coming through it. So yeah, the hearing protection was, and we were literally in situations in Mogadishu where when we were leaving the object, we'd linked up with the Rangers, we retrieved all the soldiers we were going to be able to retrieve, and we were leaving, on the way out, we were in a situation where you'd be moving down the street and there's alleyways going down and we're taking fire from the alleyways. Well, you stack up on the alleyway and guys are on, like 3 or 4 guys are on that corner, shooting down the alleyway, suppressive fire so other guys can cross without getting shot at. And then, they take it up on the other corner, and then but you're literally 3 or 4 guys high. I remember when I was doing that on one corner, hot brass from my M16 went down platoon sergeant's shirt burned him. He was
Ah.
he was a little less than pleased. He didn't get on before. He knew exactly what was going on, but he got burnt.
Who was that?
Sergeant Warner. I don't think you've ever met him. He retired. He was a sergeant major when he got out.
We went to the 20th anniversary of the Battle of Mogadishu a couple of years ago, and I got to meet a lot of these guys, and one of them was their
Sergeant major.
Sergeant major, and I was joking around with
Battalion
him.
sergeant major. He's the highest ranking enlisted guy in the whole battalion.
Yeah.
And they used to say that this is a guy that's harder than woodpecker lips. I mean, he was a tough dude, and you did not mess with him.
And so he was a Yankees fan. He was from New York. So I was teasing him because they were losing and we were doing great. And all the guys were like, "What's she doing? What's she doing?" He was fine with it.
Yeah.
He and I were joking
Yeah.
around. I'm not his soldier. You know, he didn't. But
Everybody else was like, "I can't believe you talked to the sergeant major like that."
well, I know they were like,
Don't you know who he is?
Yeah, but he's not my boss.
So 20 years later, this guy's probably been retired for 15 years or something. At least 10 years. He's an older guy now. And every soldier there didn't call him by his name. And he has no authority over any of us anymore. But every single soldier there addressed him as Sergeant Major. Every single one of them.
Great respect. I mean, it was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
But when you have someone who leads you and like that you respect their leadership, that's huge. But
And one more question: Did you ever work with like any? I know you worked with APCs and all that, but did you ever like work with any tanks or anything? Or
Not really. I mean, we really didn't even work with the APC. I was in the APC for 15, 20 minutes before we dismounted and fought. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
So, we did not do a lot of work with them. When I was in the MPs, our vehicles were Humvees.
Okay.
And we were there early. This was before the advent of the up armored Humvee. So we were in soft skin, no armored Humvees. They were older than the kids driving them.
Jeez.
So it amazes me to this day that we didn't have more casualties. I don't know how the hell we managed that, because it's like driving a regular car through Iraq. There was no protection at all.
I think they're replacing them now with that.
Yeah, they have. But you got to figure I was there in 2003.
And it's what, 13 years later?
Yeah, So there was a lot of changes after, and we went home in July. Actually, I think it was August. I don't know. It was like the very last day of July in 2004. So yeah, after that, things did change. They had all the up armoreds, and they had the MRAPs.
Yeah, that's what they're
familiar
replacing.
with those?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what they're replacing them with, I think.
Yeah, so there were a lot of things, and the soldiers that came after us had much better equipment than we did. I mean, we had the dregs,
better living situation too.
Yes, well, yeah, they started building. They did start building up the bases even before we left. So our last base that we were on was Camp Buring in Kuwait, which was a base that we used for like 2 or 3 months to do convoy escorts up to Baghdad. And they had air conditioning, and it was crazy. It was like, oh my God, we felt like we were in heaven. And then you come home after 16 months, and you don't even know which way is up. Holy cow, do you believe this? It's just unbelievable.
And they had to burn their own waste. It was like this.
Yeah, when you have the 55-gallon drums for the toilets, like we had the first couple months, you have to. They call them burnout latrines, right? You have to. And I was the field sanitation NCO for the platoon, so I had to teach everybody how to do it. What is it? I can't remember the ratio, but it was something like 3 parts diesel, 1 part mogas, which is gasoline, and you got to mix it. You got to get a stick and mix it up, and then you light it on fire, and you got to sit there and stir it while it's burning because it won't burn all the way through. It's a pretty gross job, but every soldier, is that's one of those moments when you reflect on your career choices, right?
Yeah.
I am stirring a big vial of
Every enlisted soldier who's been in combat has probably had that experience, or at least in the early days.
I guess that's why people go off on the Air Force, because they're just probably sitting there back at the bases.
Yeah.
Well, I do tool on the Air Force, but I'll tell you what. anyone who wants to join up and thinks there's a safe job, like, oh, I got a great job in the Air Force, I'm never going to get deployed and I'm never going to be in combat. So that job does not exist. I'll tell you about something. When we were in the last few months we were there, and we were doing the convoys from Kuwait up to Baghdad, they were grabbing guys whose jobs was to drive buses in the Air Force on the bases stateside.
Like at Fort Polk and.
Yeah, well, Fort Polk was an Army base, but yeah,
Okay.
that idea, there's different Air Force bases. They had buses that would transport airmen around the base, right? And this guy's whole job was he gets there, whatever time in the morning and drives the bus all day, and then he goes home. That's his job in the Air Force. They grabbed these guys off of these bases. They sent them to Iraq. And they put them on 5-ton trucks with 50 caliber machine guns mounted on the back, and they gave them to us as an asset for our convoy escorts. One of the most dangerous jobs in the country. And these guys were so angry, you cannot even imagine. They thought
They were Air Force bus drivers.
they were Air Force bus drivers, and they thought they were never going to see combat. And boy, were they wrong.
Oh, I think that looks like it's that. I think that's been one of the longest interviews. So thank you so much. This has been an incredible asset, and I really appreciate everything.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right.